My daughter-in-law just told me I should be grateful for even being allowed at my son's wedding. My name is Harold Mitchell, and I'm supposedly dying of cancer. Here's what she doesn't know. I've been lying about the terminal diagnosis for 6 months. The cancer is fake. The 3-month prognosis is a test. And tonight, while she thinks she's humiliating a helpless old man, she's actually destroying a $3.7 million inheritance. Every cruel dismissal, every calculated insult, every moment they treated me like human garbage because they thought I was powerless. I documented it all. They seated me with the catering staff tonight, fed me reheated leftovers, told me my medical condition was dampening their celebration. What they're about to discover will destroy a lot more than their mood. You know what's devastating about family betrayal? Sometimes you don't need to orchestrate revenge. Sometimes people reveal their true nature at exactly the wrong moment, to exactly the wrong person, and you just document their self-destruction. The recordings I captured tonight will cost them millions. The will I'm about to sign will redirect their entire future to charity. And the look on their faces when they realize what they've lost will be worth every penny. I hope you'll stay for this story. Hit subscribe and let me know where you're watching from, because what happens next is absolutely brutal. Let me show you how a wedding reception became the most expensive character assassination in family history. The humiliation started before I even entered Riverside Banquet Hall. "Dad, you're at table 12, Jake said, not meeting my eyes, with the catering staff. Table 12 sat in the back corner, behind a decorative pillar, the kind of spot you put people you're ashamed of, the kind of spot that says, "We had to invite you, but we don't want you seen." I looked at the seating chart. Jake and Stephanie's table, table 1 obviously, sat center stage. Her parents occupied table 2. My table was literally numbered after the venue staff's break area. "The catering staff?" I asked quietly. "Well, you know." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "Stephanie thought it would be easier, less walking for you, because of the situation." The situation. That's what they called my supposed terminal cancer now. Never Dad's illness or Harold's condition, just the situation, like an inconvenient weather delay. I watched Jake fidget with his rental tuxedo, a $200 affair that I later learned he'd put on credit. The same credit cards he'd been maxing out for months, planning this $23,500 wedding while his dying father lived on Social Security. "I understand," I said, and I genuinely did. For 6 months I'd been watching, testing, learning who my family really was when they thought I had no power left. The results were more devastating than any real cancer diagnosis could have been. The fake medical records in my jacket pocket told everyone I had 3 months to live. Dr. Patricia Davis, my longtime family friend, had helped me create the perfect terminal diagnosis. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The kind that makes people uncomfortable. The kind that makes them start planning your funeral while you're still breathing. But the real documents, the ones nobody knew about, told a very different story. My 1997 Honda Civic sat alone in the parking lot, surrounded by leased BMWs and financed luxury SUVs. 47 years of postal service doesn't buy you flash, but it does teach you patience. It teaches you to save every penny, to invest wisely, to build something real, while others buy appearances. Inside my jacket pocket, next to the fake medical records, sat a Vanguard account statement. Balance, $3,742,890.43. 47 years of discipline. 47 years of choosing substance over style. Every overtime shift, every holiday worked, every vacation skipped. All of it carefully invested in index funds, while my son thought his father was just another blue-collar nobody. "Harold!" Stephanie's voice cut through my thoughts. She approached in her $2,800 dress, all smiles for the cameras. "You made it. We weren't sure you'd be up for it." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Listen, we're keeping things upbeat today, for the photos, so maybe less talk about the medical stuff? People are trying to celebrate." I nodded. "Of course. And the flowers at your table are just leftovers from the church. Don't read anything into it. Leftover flowers. For the dying man." But I wasn't dying. I was testing. And with every cruel dismissal, every casual humiliation, my family was failing spectacularly. The private investigator I'd hired, James Cooper, 40 years of experience, had been documenting everything for 6 months. Every conversation where they discussed my situation like a problem to be managed. Every time they calculated inheritance timelines, every moment they showed their true character when they thought I was powerless. Margaret Wells, my estate attorney for 25 years, had the paperwork ready. 2 versions of my will sat in her office safe. The original left everything to Jake. The new version, the one my family was earning through their choices, told a very different story. But they didn't know any of this yet. As I walked toward table 12, I had no idea that the evening's cruelty was just beginning. The reception started exactly as I expected. I sat between Maria, a 19-year-old server, and Carlos, the assistant manager. Nice people, hardworking. They treated me with more respect in 10 minutes than my own family had shown in 6 months. "You're the groom's father?" Maria asked, refilling my water glass. "I am. Must be proud. Beautiful wedding." I smiled. It certainly cost enough. $23,500 to be exact. I'd seen the venue contract when Jake left it on my kitchen table during one of his increasingly rare visits. The same visits where he'd eye my prescription bottles and ask careful questions about my estate planning. Jake made $38,000 a year as an assistant manager at Miller's Auto Sales. Stephanie pulled in $42,000 at her marketing firm. Together, they were spending more than half their annual income on one day, but that was their choice. What bothered me wasn't the money. It was the calculation behind it. 6 months ago, when I first shared my diagnosis, Jake's response wasn't grief. It was relief. I could see it in his eyes, the quick flash of someone doing inheritance math. Stephanie had been even more transparent. "Well," she'd said, "at least now we know where we stand financially." For the wedding planning, where we stand financially. Like my death was a business opportunity. I watched them now at table 1, laughing with Stephanie's parents, the Clarks, who owned a small insurance agency and never missed a chance to remind everyone about their generational wealth. $300,000 in assets, according to the background check I'd commissioned. Comfortable, but hardly wealthy. Yet they'd raised a daughter who looked at a dying postal worker and saw only an embarrassment to be managed. "Dad seems to be doing well," I heard Stephanie tell her mother, loud enough for nearby tables to overhear. "All things considered, we're just grateful he made it to the wedding. Grateful I made it. To my own son's wedding." The irony was breathtaking. If they'd shown even basic human decency, if they'd treated me like family instead of a burden, I'd have gladly helped with the wedding costs, the down payment on their house, Jake's student loans. Instead, they chose to see me as a problem with an expiration date. My phone buzzed. A text from James Cooper. "Package ready for delivery. Confirm timing?" I typed back, "Wait for my signal." The package contained 6 months of surveillance footage, audio recordings of conversations they thought I couldn't hear, screenshots of text messages between Jake and Stephanie discussing my timeline and their inheritance windfall. But the most damaging evidence was their own behavior tonight. I'd given them one final chance. One last opportunity to show basic human kindness to a man they believed was dying. Instead, they'd seated me with the staff, served me leftover flowers, and whispered about keeping my medical situation quiet because it was dampening their celebration. Every choice they made was being documented, every cruelty catalogued. Margaret Wells sat at table 6, a legitimate guest, invited as a family friend. She'd known my late wife Sarah for 30 years, but tonight she was here in a professional capacity, carrying documents that would change everything. In her briefcase sat the new will, the one that left my entire estate, $3.7 million, to the American Cancer Society, the same disease I'd supposedly been fighting. Jake didn't know that his inheritance had an escape clause, a character test built into the very structure of my estate planning. If my son demonstrates through his actions during my illness that he values human dignity over personal gain, the document read, he inherits everything. If not, the money serves a better purpose. Tonight was their final exam, and they were failing spectacularly. I watched Jake laugh at something Stephanie's father said, my son, who hadn't visited me in 3 weeks, who'd stopped calling unless he needed something, who'd told his friends that his father's cancer was actually kind of convenient timing for their financial planning. Yes, I had recordings of that conversation too. The stakes weren't just money. They were about what kind of people my son and daughter-in-law really were when they thought no one was watching. When they believed power had shifted completely away from me. They'd already chosen their priorities, money over compassion, appearances over authenticity, social status over family bonds, But they didn't understand the most important lesson I'd learned in 47 years of postal service. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never assume that power is always visible. And never reveal your hand until you're ready to play your final card. That moment was coming soon. The first real confrontation came during dinner service. I watched the servers bring out the salad course to every table, except mine. Maria looked confused, checking her list twice. "Excuse me," I called to the catering manager. "I think we were missed." "Oh," she looked flustered. "Let me check. Table 12. Yes, there was a special instruction, something about dietary restrictions." I hadn't ordered any dietary restrictions. Stephanie appeared at my shoulder, all sweetness and fake concern. "Dad, we thought you might not have much appetite, with the treatments and everything." "I'm hungry," I said simply. Of course you are." She signaled frantically to the catering manager. "Could you bring my father-in-law a small portion? Maybe something mild?" A small portion, while everyone else received the full 3-course meal they'd paid for. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying just enough to reach nearby tables, "I'll take the full portion, same as everyone else." Stephanie's smile faltered. "Dad, you really don't need to force yourself." "I'm not forcing anything." The nearby tables had gone quiet. I could feel them listening, watching this interaction between the sick father and the concerned daughter-in-law. "Harold," Stephanie leaned closer, lowering her voice. "People are watching. Let's not make a scene." "I'm not making a scene. I'm ordering dinner." Her mask slipped for just a moment. "Fine, whatever. But don't blame me if you can't finish it." She stalked back to table 1, where Jake was deep in conversation with the Clarks about real estate investments. He hadn't even noticed our exchange. My phone buzzed again. Another text from James Cooper. "Recording everything. Audio is crystal clear." Good. Let it be crystal clear. The salad arrived 15 minutes later. A wilted, obviously reheated portion that looked nothing like the fresh plates I'd seen delivered to other tables. I ate every bite, maintaining eye contact with Stephanie across the room. "This is good," I told Maria. "Very fresh." She looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry about the delay, sir. There was some confusion in the kitchen." "No confusion," I said. "Just poor communication." During the main course, things escalated further. Jake finally approached my table, drink in hand, tie loosened. The open bar had been flowing freely. "Dad, Stephanie says you're being difficult about the food." "I ordered dinner, same as everyone else." "Come on, you know what I mean." He glanced around, making sure no one could overhear. "She's trying to help. This whole day is stressful enough without you. Without me what?" Jake shifted uncomfortably. "Without you making it about your condition. By ordering food. By calling attention to yourself. People are supposed to be celebrating, not thinking about," he gestured vaguely, "about me dying? Jesus, Dad, keep your voice down." I looked at my son. Really looked at him. 22 years old when his mother died. I'd raised him alone, worked double shifts to pay for his college, sacrificed my own retirement plans to give him opportunities I never had. "Jacob," I said, using his full name the way I had when he was 12 and in trouble. "Are you embarrassed by me?" "What? No, of course not." "Then why am I sitting with the catering staff?" "It's not like that. We thought you'd be more comfortable." "More comfortable being hidden?" Jake's face flushed. "You're being paranoid. The cancer is making you—" "Making me what?" He stopped himself, but I could see the words he'd swallowed. "Crazy. Difficult. Impossible." "Look," he said finally. "This is Stephanie's day. Her dream wedding. Can't you just—" "Cooperate?" "Cooperate. Like a child being asked to behave." "I am cooperating," I said. "I'm sitting where you put me, eating what you're willing to serve me, staying quiet about my medical situation because it makes people uncomfortable." "Good. That's good. But I won't apologize for existing, Jacob." Something in my tone made him step back. For a moment he looked uncertain, like he was seeing something in his father that he hadn't expected. "Fine," he said. "Do whatever you want. Just try not to ruin this for her, okay?" He walked away before I could respond. Try not to ruin this for her. His dying father's presence was a potential threat to his wife's perfect day. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Margaret Wells. "Phase 1 complete. Are you ready for Phase 2? Her response came immediately. "Documents prepared. Waiting for your signal." Across the room I watched Jake return to table 1, whisper something to Stephanie, and gesture in my direction. She looked over at me with undisguised irritation,
then said something that made Jake's face darken. Whatever she'd told him, it wasn't kind. My phone buzzed with another update from James Cooper. Facial recognition confirms guest count at 147. All exits monitored.
When you're ready, everyone will see everything. 147 witnesses to my family's character test. 147 people who would remember how a dying man was treated at his son's wedding, but they didn't know the most important detail yet. I wasn't dying, and their real test was just beginning. The evening's cruelest moment was still coming. I could sense it building like a storm. The way Stephanie kept glancing at me and whispering to her friends, the way Jake avoided eye contact entirely, the way conversations at nearby tables kept stopping when I moved. "Sir?" Maria refilled my coffee cup. "Are you all right? You look tired." "Just thinking," I said. "About happy memories, I hope." Happy memories. Yes, I had those. 43 years married to Sarah. Jake's first steps. Teaching him to ride a bike. High school graduation. College acceptance letter. But also, the day Sarah died and Jake was too busy with work to stay at the hospital. The Christmas he spent with Stephanie's family instead of coming home. The birthday call that lasted 90 seconds because they were heading out to dinner. And now this. The wedding where his dying father raided a seat behind a decorative pillar. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Harold Mitchell?" Speaking. "This is Dr. Patricia Davis returning your call. The test results you asked about?" I could see several people at nearby tables straining to listen. A cancer patient getting test results at his son's wedding. It was the kind of drama that made people uncomfortable and curious at the same time. "Yes, doctor. Everything looks exactly as we discussed. The timeline we established 6 months ago remains accurate." "I understand. Are you somewhere private? We should talk about next steps." "I'm at my son's wedding. Can we discuss this later?" A pause. "Of course. But Harold, don't wait too long. Time is still a factor." I hung up. The performance had been perfect. Patricia's acting skills, honed through years of delivering real diagnoses, made every word sound authentic. But the nearby guests had heard exactly what I intended. A dying man receiving medical updates at his son's wedding. The kind of tragic timing that would make anyone feel sympathetic. Anyone except my family. Jake appeared at my table again, but this time his expression was different. Angry. "Dad, was that your doctor? At my wedding? She called me. You couldn't let it go to voicemail? She said it was important. Everything's important with you lately." His voice carried further than he intended. "Every conversation, every phone call, every meal, it all has to be about your condition." Several guests were openly staring now. "Jacob." "No, Dad. I'm serious. This is my wedding day. Mine and Stephanie's. Can't you just pretend to be normal for one evening?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Pretend to be normal. As if having cancer made me abnormal. As if being sick was a choice I'd made to inconvenience him. "I'll try," I said quietly. But I was recording everything now. My phone, set to voice memo mode, captured every word. James Cooper had taught me the technique. How to document conversations without anyone noticing. Jake walked away, shaking his head. I watched him return to Stephanie, who looked at me with undisguised contempt and said something that made him laugh. Laughing at the dying man. At his father. My second phone, the encrypted one James had given me, buzzed with a message. "Remote access to wedding photographer's equipment confirmed. Every reaction will be documented." The photographer. I'd forgotten about him. Stephanie had hired premier wedding photography for $2,800. Another expense Jake couldn't afford. But what they didn't know was that James Cooper's company provided security consultation to Premier's owner. Every photo, every video clip, every candid moment was being saved to our servers. Margaret Wells approached my table, moving carefully through the crowd. "Harold, how are you holding up?" "I've been better." She sat down across from me, opening her small purse just enough for me to see the corner of a legal document inside. "I brought what you asked for," she said quietly. "Both versions. And if I decide to proceed, everything is already notarized. It would take effect immediately." I looked across the room at Jake and Stephanie, now slow dancing to their chosen song. They looked happy, in love, completely unaware that their future was being determined by their own choices. "Margaret, in your professional opinion, have they failed the test?" She followed my gaze to the dance floor. "Harold, I've been practicing estate law for 30 years. I've seen families destroy themselves over money they never even had yet.
But this...
This what? This might be the cruelest thing I've ever witnessed. The way they've treated you tonight, knowing you're supposedly dying. She shook her head. If Sarah could see this... Sarah, my wife, would have been horrified. She'd raised Jake to be better than this. The phone call was a nice touch, Margaret continued. Very convincing. Patricia's a good friend, and a good actress. Even I almost believed she was delivering real test results. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the reception continue around us. Happy guests, flowing drinks, celebration and joy. Except at table 12, where the dying man sat planning his family's reckoning. The moment I'd been dreading and expecting came during the toasts. Jake stood first, champagne glass raised, his face flushed from the open bar. The microphone feedback squealed briefly before he found his rhythm. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate the beginning of my and Stephanie's life together. In a polite applause, I clapped along with everyone else. This has been the most incredible day, surrounded by everyone who matters to us. Everyone who matters. From my seat behind the decorative pillar, I wondered if that included me. Stephanie, you've made me the luckiest man alive. You've given me purpose, direction, and most importantly, hope for our future together. Hope for their future, while believing his father's future was measured in months. And I want to thank our families for their support, the Clarks for welcoming me with open arms and for raising such an amazing daughter. Enthusiastic applause from the Clark family table, and of course my dad. The room went quiet. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. How would the groom handle his dying father? Dad's been, well, he's been dealing with a lot lately. Health issues that have been tough on all of us. Health issues, not cancer, not a terminal diagnosis. Just vague health issues that were apparently tough on everyone except the person actually experiencing them. But he's here tonight, and that means everything to me. Scattered, awkward applause. The kind of polite response you give when someone mentions something uncomfortable but necessary. Jake raised his glass. To new beginnings, lasting love, and cherishing the time we have with the people we care about. He looked directly at me during that last part, a pointed reminder that my time was supposedly limited. I raised my water glass along with everyone else, but my hands were steady while Jake's trembled slightly. The weight of performing caring in public while treating me like a burden in private was apparently taking its toll. Then Stephanie took the microphone. Thank you, Jake. That was beautiful. She kissed him, and the crowd awed appropriately. I also want to thank everyone for being here. This has been my dream wedding, everything I ever imagined. Her dream wedding, where the groom's dying father sat with the catering staff. The Clarks have been incredible, supporting us through the planning process and helping make tonight possible. More applause for the Clarks, who beamed proudly. And Jake's family. She paused, looking directly at me. Well, Jake's dad has been present throughout this process. Present, not supportive, not helpful, just present. We know this is a difficult time for everyone, dealing with ongoing situations, but we're grateful that Harold could make it tonight despite his limitations. My limitations. Terminal cancer had become my limitations. Jake and I believe strongly in family, in supporting each other through good times and challenging times, and tonight is definitely a good time. She raised her glass. So here's to family, both the family we're born with and the family we choose to build together. The family we choose to build, as opposed to the family we're stuck with. The applause was more enthusiastic this time. Stephanie's words had been carefully crafted to sound gracious, while subtly distancing herself from the uncomfortable reality of Jake's sick father. But she wasn't finished. As the formal toasts ended and people began moving around again, Stephanie made her way to my table. She'd clearly had several drinks, and her carefully maintained composure was starting to slip. "Harold," she said, loud enough for surrounding tables to hear, "I hope you're enjoying the wedding." "It's beautiful," I replied. "Good, good." She swayed slightly. "I wanted to thank you for being so understanding about everything." "Understanding about what?" "You know, the seating arrangements, the dietary considerations, keeping things upbeat." She gestured vaguely. "This day is really important to us, and I appreciate you not making it about other things." Other things. My supposedly terminal illness was now other things. "I wouldn't want to overshadow your special day," I said. "Exactly." She beamed as if I'd finally understood something crucial. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." She leaned closer, and I could smell the champagne on her breath. "Between us,
I was worried you might get emotional or make people uncomfortable with all the medical talk. I see. But you've been perfect, really. Just sitting quietly, not drawing attention to yourself. It means so much. Sitting quietly, not drawing attention, like a well-behaved pet. And honestly, she continued, her voice dropping to what she thought was a whisper, I know this might sound selfish, but I'm glad we're getting married now. While you're still, while you can still be here. While I can still be here. While I'm still alive. We almost postponed the wedding when Jake told me about your diagnosis. But then we thought, what if we wait and you...
Well, what if you don't make it to see us get married? That would have been so sad. So they'd moved up their wedding timeline to accommodate my death schedule. That was very thoughtful, I managed. I know, right? It was Jake's idea, actually. He said his dad would want to see him happy before the end. Before the end. She was discussing my impending death at her wedding reception like it was a scheduling conflict they'd successfully managed. Stephanie, I said quietly. Yes? Can I ask you something? Of course. If I weren't sick, would you have invited me to the wedding? She blinked, clearly not expecting the question. What do you mean? I mean, if I were healthy, would I still be welcome at your wedding? Or is my invitation based on sympathy? Her face went through several expressions. Confusion, discomfort, and finally, something that looked like honesty. Harold, that's a really weird question, but it's a fair one. She looked around, realizing that several people were listening to our conversation. When she spoke again, her voice carried clearly across the nearby tables. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. This isn't about you being sick. This is about you being... She paused, searching for words. You're not exactly the kind of family we're trying to build here. The words hit the surrounding guests like a physical blow. I could see their faces, shock, discomfort, secondhand embarrassment. What kind of family are you trying to build? I asked. Successful, forward-thinking, people who contribute to each other's growth instead of... She gestured at me. Instead of just taking up space. Taking up space. At my son's wedding. The silence around us was deafening. Even the band seemed to have stopped playing. Stephanie, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the reception hall. Thank you for being so honest. She suddenly seemed to realize what she'd said and where she'd said it. Her eyes went wide as she looked around at the staring faces. I didn't mean... That came out wrong. No, I said, standing slowly from my chair. I think it came out exactly right. For the first time all evening, I had everyone's complete attention, and I was ready to use it. Margaret Wells appeared at my side as if summoned. Harold, I'm sorry I'm late. The traffic from downtown was terrible. She carried herself with the authority of someone accustomed to courtrooms and boardrooms. 30 years of estate law had given her an presence that commanded attention. Margaret, I said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, I'd like you to meet my daughter-in-law, Stephanie. Ah, Margaret's smile was polite but cold. The bride, how lovely to finally meet you. This is Margaret Wells, I continued, my attorney. Stephanie's face went pale. Attorney? Estate planning, Margaret said matter-of-factly. Harold and I have been working together for quite some time. The crowd around us had grown larger. Word was spreading through the reception that something significant was happening at table 12. Mrs. Wells, Stephanie said, her voice shaking slightly. Is this really the time? Actually, it's the perfect time. Margaret opened her briefcase and withdrew a manila folder. Harold, we need to discuss the updates to your will. A collective intake of breath from the audience. Estate planning discussions at wedding receptions were unusual, to say the least. Of course, I said. Should we do this privately? No need, Margaret replied. These are family matters, and your family is all here. Jake pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with panic and alcohol. Dad, what's going on? What attorney? What will... Jacob, I said, I'd like you to meet Margaret Wells. She's been handling my legal affairs for 25 years. Legal affairs? Jake's voice cracked. What legal affairs? Margaret smiled. Your father has quite a substantial estate to manage. We've been updating his will to reflect his recent experiences with family dynamics. Estate? Stephanie whispered. What estate? He's a postal worker. Was a postal worker, I corrected. Retired. 47 years of service. Harold, Margaret said, consulting her documents, shall I review the asset summary for your family? The crowd had grown to include most of the wedding guests. Even the band had stopped playing to watch the unfolding drama. "Please," I said. Margaret cleared her throat and began reading. Primary residence, 1247 Oak Street, fully paid, current value approximately $180,000. Jake's mouth fell open. "You paid off the house?"
Investment portfolio, Margaret continued, held primarily in Vanguard index funds, current value $3,742,890.43. The silence was deafening. "Did she say 3 million?" someone whispered. 700,000? Another voice added. 0.7 million, Margaret corrected. 3.7 million total. Stephanie swayed on her feet. That's impossible. 47 years of disciplined investing, I said. Every overtime shift, every holiday worked, every vacation not taken. Compound interest is a powerful thing. But you drive a 27-year-old Honda, Jake stammered. It runs perfectly. You buy your clothes at thrift stores. I like vintage. You live on Social Security. I live within my means. Margaret consulted her papers again. There's also the matter of the recent charitable foundation Harold established.
The Mitchell Family Foundation, seeded with an initial donation of $200,000. "A foundation?" Stephanie's voice was barely audible. "For cancer research," I said. Seemed appropriate, given my situation. "Your situation," Margaret said, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, let's discuss that." She withdrew another document from her briefcase. "Harold, should I share the updated medical records with your family?" "What updated medical records?" Jake asked. Margaret handed him a single sheet of paper. "Clean bill of health, dated yesterday." Jake stared at the document like it was written in a foreign language. "Clean bill of health, but the cancer." "There is no cancer," I said quietly. The crowd erupted in confused murmurs. "No cancer? But he's dying. He said terminal." "Dad," Jake's voice was shaking. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm not dying, Jacob. I never was." Stephanie grabbed the medical report from Jake's hands. This says you're in perfect health for a 72-year-old man. Dr. Davis is very thorough. But the diagnosis, the treatments, the 3 months to live." "A test," I said simply. "A test?" Jake looked like he might collapse. "A test of what?" "Character, family values, human decency." I looked around at the crowd of wedding guests. 6 months ago, I told you I had terminal cancer. Tonight, I wanted to see how you'd treat a dying man at your wedding. You lied to us? Stephanie's voice was rising. About having cancer? About dying? I did. For 6 months? Yes. She sputtered. "That's sick. That's psychotic." "Is it?" I asked. "Or is it revealing?" Margaret stepped forward. "Perhaps this would be a good time to discuss the will options, Harold." She withdrew 2 documents from her briefcase. Option 1, the original will, leaving everything to Jake, $3.7 million. Jake reached for the document, but Margaret held it back. Option 2, the revised will, reflecting Harold's experiences over the past 6 months. The entire estate goes to the American Cancer Society. "What?" Jake's face went white. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. Dad, I'm your son, your only child." "Yes, you are. Then the money should come to me." "Should it?" "It's mine by right." I looked at my son, really looked at him. "Tell me, Jacob, what right have you demonstrated tonight? I'm your family. Family treats each other with dignity, with respect, with love. I do love you. Do you? Or do you love what you thought I was leaving you?" Stephanie stepped forward, her face twisted with rage. "You manipulated us. You lied about dying to trick us." "I tested you," I corrected. "And you failed." "Failed what?" "Basic human decency." Margaret cleared her throat. "Harold, which version of the will would you like me to file?" I looked around at the crowd of wedding guests. 147 witnesses to my family's character. 147 people who had seen exactly how a supposedly dying man was treated at his son's wedding. "Give me 5 minutes to decide," I said. But I already knew my answer. I've made my decision. The reception hall was dead silent. 147 guests held their breath, waiting to see if a son's inheritance would survive his wedding day cruelty. "Margaret," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the room, "please file the revised will." "No!" Jake lunged forward, desperation in his voice. "Dad, please, I can explain everything." "Explain what, exactly?" "Tonight. The seating. It wasn't personal. Stephanie thought what?"
Jake looked at his new wife, panic in his eyes. She thought you'd be more comfortable. More comfortable being hidden, not hidden.
Just away from the stress of the main tables. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. 6 hours of recordings. Jacob, would you like to hear what you really said about me tonight? His face went white. You recorded us? I recorded everything. I pressed play on the first file. Jake's voice filled the room through my phone's speaker. This whole day is stressful enough without you making it about your condition. Gasps from the crowd. Jake's own words, clear as day. That's taken out of context. I played another clip. Stephanie's voice. Between us, I was worried you might get emotional or make people uncomfortable with all the medical talk. More shocked murmurs from the guests. Dad, stop. Another recording. Jake again. Can't you just pretend to be normal for one evening? The crowd was visibly uncomfortable now. These weren't ambiguous statements. They were clear evidence of how a dying man had been treated by his own family.
And my personal favorite, I said, queuing up the final recording. Stephanie's voice echoed through the hall. You're not exactly the kind of family we're trying to build here. People who contribute to each other's growth instead of just taking up space. The silence that followed was deafening. Taking up space, I repeated, at my son's wedding, while supposedly dying of cancer. Margaret opened her briefcase and withdrew a pen. Harold, I need your signature on the revised will. Wait. Stephanie stepped forward, her mask of composure completely gone. You can't do this. We made one mistake. One mistake? I looked at her incredulously. You seated me with the catering staff. You served me reheated leftovers. You told me to stay quiet about my medical condition because it made people uncomfortable. You publicly stated that I'm not the kind of family you want to build. I was drunk. You were honest. Jake grabbed my arm. Dad, I'll make this right. We'll move you to the head table. Jacob, I removed his hand gently. Do you know what the saddest part of this is? What? If you had shown even basic human kindness tonight, if you had treated a dying man with dignity, you would have inherited $3.7 million. The number hit him like a physical blow. $3.7 million. Instead, you chose to prioritize appearances over family, status over compassion, your wife's comfort over your father's dignity. Stephanie was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Please, we can start over. We can treat you better. You can't start over, Stephanie. Character isn't something you can change for money. It's something you either have or you don't. I turned to Margaret. Where do I sign? She pointed to a line at the bottom of the document. Right here. As I signed my name, I could hear Jake behind me, his voice breaking. Dad, please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you are, son. You're sorry you lost the money. No, I'm sorry about how we treated you. Are you, or are you sorry you got caught? I handed the pen back to Margaret. It's done. Wait. A new voice cut through the chaos. James Cooper, my private investigator, stepped out of the crowd. He'd been posing as a guest all evening, documenting everything. Harold, before you finalize this, there's something else your family should know. What now? Stephanie snapped. James pulled out a tablet and showed it to the crowd. 6 months of surveillance footage, every conversation where you discussed Harold's inheritance, every time you calculated timelines for his death, every moment you showed your true feelings when you thought he couldn't hear. The tablet screen showed Jake and Stephanie in their apartment, discussing my supposed 3-month prognosis. Jake's voice from the recording. At least now we know where we stand financially, for the wedding planning. Stephanie's voice. It's actually kind of perfect timing. We can have the wedding, get the inheritance, and start our real life together. The crowd was horrified. These weren't just insensitive comments. They were evidence of a couple actively calculating the benefits of a father's death. Turn it off, Jake pleaded. But James continued playing the recordings. Conversation after conversation where my son and daughter-in-law treated my supposed terminal illness like a business opportunity. Enough, I said quietly, and James stopped the playback. Margaret witnessed my signature and sealed the document. The revised will is now in effect. The American Cancer Society will be very grateful for this donation. $3.7 million, Jake whispered, staring at the signed papers. Gone. Not gone, I corrected. Redirected. To people who actually fight cancer instead of celebrating it as an inheritance opportunity. I stood up from the table and looked around at the assembled wedding guests, 147 witnesses to the most expensive character test in family history. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent reception hall, thank you for attending this wedding.
and for witnessing the results of a 6-month examination of family values. I turned to Jake one final time. Son, you have a choice now. You can spend the rest of your life bitter about the money you lost, or you can spend it becoming the kind of person who would have kept it. Dad, please. The test is over, Jacob. You failed. But that doesn't mean you can't pass the next one. I walked toward the exit, Margaret at my side. Behind me, I could hear Stephanie screaming about lawyers and contesting the will and how this couldn't be legal. But it was completely legal and completely final. 47 years of postal service had taught me patience.
Tonight had taught me about character.
And tomorrow, the American Cancer Society would be $3.7 million richer. The aftermath was swift and devastating. By Monday morning, the story had spread throughout our small town of Millfield like wildfire. 147 wedding guests had witnessed the most spectacular inheritance reversal in local history, and they were talking. Margaret called me Tuesday afternoon with updates. Harold, Stephanie retained Davidson and Associates to contest the will. Let me guess, they told her she has no case. Exactly. The will is ironclad. You were mentally competent when you signed it, and we have witnesses. Plus, the recordings make it clear why you changed your mind. What about Jake? He's not contesting. I think he knows he doesn't have grounds. I wasn't surprised. Jake had always been weak-willed, but he wasn't stupid. The financial consequences for my son were immediate and severe.
The wedding had maxed out 3 credit cards, $23,500 in debt that they'd expected to pay off with inheritance money that no longer existed. Jake's phone calls started Wednesday. Dad, we need to talk. I'm listening. The credit cards. We can't make the payments. Stephanie lost her job. She lost her job. The story got back to her company. Something about character concerns and public relations. His voice was hollow. Her boss said they couldn't have someone representing their brand who treated family like that. I felt no satisfaction in hearing this. Despite everything, Jake was still my son. And the house? I asked. We're going to lose it. We put the down payment on credit, thinking we'd pay it off when... He couldn't finish the sentence. When I died. When they inherited money built on my corpse. Jacob, I want you to understand something. This isn't about punishment, isn't it? No, it's about consequences. For 47 years, I saved every penny, worked every overtime shift, sacrificed every comfort to build something for my family. You chose to see that sacrifice as something you were entitled to, rather than something you should be grateful for. Silence on his end. The money is going to cancer research because that's where it can do the most good. Real cancer research, for people who are actually dying. I know. Do you? Do you really understand why? Because we failed your test. No, Jacob, because you failed yourselves. Thursday brought news from James Cooper. Harold, you should know. The wedding photographer released all the footage to us as agreed. The documentation is complete. And? Stephanie's been trying to sell her story to local news stations. Something about elderly abuse and manipulation. I laughed despite myself. How's that working out for her? Not well. When they hear the recordings of her calling you a burden and saying you're taking up space, they're not interested in portraying her as a victim. Good. There's something else. The American Cancer Society wants to meet with you. About what? They want to establish the Harold Mitchell Research Grant. $3.7 million is the largest single donation they've received in the state's history. That gave me pause. A research grant in my name. Sarah would have liked that. Friday brought an unexpected visitor. Jake stood on my front porch looking like he'd aged 10 years in a week. No Stephanie in sight. Can I come in? I stepped aside to let him enter. He looked around the modest living room, the same furniture he'd grown up with, the same family photos on the mantel, the same quiet dignity he'd been embarrassed by. Dad, I came to apologize. I'm listening. Not about the money. I mean, yes, about the money. But that's not why I'm here. He sat down on the couch where his mother used to read him bedtime stories. I'm here because I finally understand what you were testing. What was I testing? Whether I loved you or what you could give me. I sat down across from him. And what did you discover? That I stopped seeing you as my father and started seeing you as my inheritance? His honesty surprised me. When did that happen? I asked. I don't know. Somewhere along the way I stopped thinking about what you'd given me and started thinking about what you owed me. What did I give you? Everything. His voice broke. You gave me everything.
college, opportunities, a chance at a better life than you had, and I repaid you by treating you like a burden. We sat in silence for several minutes. Jacob, the money is gone. It's not coming back. I know. Can you live with that? I'm going to have to learn. What about Stephanie? She's having trouble accepting the situation. She thinks if she fights hard enough, she can get some of it back. And you? I think I understand now why Mom married you, and why she'd be ashamed of who I became. That was the first time all week that I felt any real sadness about my decision. But it was too late to change it, and maybe that was exactly the point. 6 months later, I received an invitation that surprised me. You're invited to the dedication of the Harold Mitchell Cancer Research Laboratory at Millfield General Hospital. Margaret had driven over to deliver it personally. Harold, this is remarkable. They're naming the entire research wing after you. I studied the invitation. The ceremony was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. Public event, media coverage, local dignitaries. Will you go? She asked. I think so. And if Jake shows up? Then we'll see what he's learned. The dedication ceremony drew a crowd of nearly 300 people.
Doctors, researchers, hospital administrators, cancer survivors, and their families. I wore my best suit, not from a thrift store this time, and arrived early. Dr. Patricia Davis, my co-conspirator in the fake diagnosis, found me before the ceremony began. Harold, I wanted to thank you. For what? For making this possible. The research grant is already funding 2 new clinical trials. Real trials, for real patients. Yes, people who are actually fighting for their lives. As the ceremony began, I noticed a familiar figure in the back of the crowd. Jake, standing alone, wearing a suit I didn't recognize. He'd lost weight, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. Our eyes met across the crowd. He nodded slightly, and I nodded back. The hospital administrator spoke about the impact of charitable giving. The research director explained how the grant would advance cancer treatment. A cancer survivor shared her story of hope. When they unveiled the plaque, Harold Mitchell Research Laboratory dedicated to finding tomorrow's cures, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. After the ceremony, Jake approached slowly. Dad, Jacob, I wanted you to know, Stephanie and I are divorced. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? I considered the question honestly. I'm sorry that your marriage couldn't survive adversity. I'm not sorry that you're free from someone who valued money over character. He smiled ruefully. She tried to get half my potential inheritance in the divorce settlement. What did you tell her? That there was no inheritance. There was only a father I'd failed. We stood together, watching families tour the new research facility that bore my name. Dad, I know I can't undo what happened at the wedding. No, you can't. But I want you to know, I've been going to counseling, trying to understand how I became someone who could treat you that way. What have you learned? That entitlement is a disease, and I was sicker than I realized. I looked at my son, really looked at him. For the first time in years, I saw traces of the boy Sarah and I had raised. Jacob, the money is gone forever. Do you understand that? Yes. Can you live with that? I'm learning to. Good, because now we can talk about what really matters. What's that? Whether we can rebuild a relationship based on love instead of money. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I'd like to try. So would I. We walked together toward the research laboratory, toward whatever kind of father and son we might become. The test was over, but the real work was just beginning. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me. What would you have done? Sometimes the hardest tests are the ones we give ourselves.